All right. Great to have everyone here with us. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the second seminar in our Sustainable Ed virtual seminar series. Sustainable Ed is a new initiative at Brown University that aims to advance evidence-based efforts to create more resilient and sustainable schools. And we seek to accomplish this by conducting policy relevant research, serving as a national hub for cross-sector collaboration, and translating evidence into actionable insights. At the end of the talk, we'll share more about how you can stay in touch with us. But without further ado, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome Dr. Jaimie Davis, professor in the Department of Nutritional Sciences at the University of Texas at Austin, and acting director of the School of Human Ecology. Dr. Davis has published over 100 papers and won numerous awards, and I'm thrilled to hear her presentation on the impact of school garden programs on health and academic outcomes. Dr. Davis, the floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Pull this up. All right. All right. Thanks for the introduction, Matt. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how gardening has shaped my research and my life. I've been doing research in this area for about 2 decades now, but I think that what hopefully I'll show you by the end of this talk is how gardening really is an intersection between health, like when we think of cardiometabolic health, but also mental and emotional health. It also pulls together the family and community, the healthcare. It touches on environmental stewardship, and then it also touches on dietary intake, which has downstream impacts on health. So gardening programs, we've been studying them for several decades now, and there's quite a lot of literature showing that they benefit health in some respect. We kind of in the early 2000s, we saw that there was an increase in children's willingness to taste vegetables. So when they grew their own types of foods, they were much more willing to taste them. They preferred them. And so those things all led to kind of increased intake of them. There's been a lot of literature around attitudes around fruits and vegetables and self-efficacy and knowledge. We've also seen a few studies show that increases in physical fitness and physical activity. And we've seen several studies that show that we also have improvements in academic performance. However, despite a lot of literature in this area, there's been very few randomized control trials that I've done in this area, and most of these were kind of before and after tests with no control. Some were quasi-experimental studies. So I'm going to kind of show y'all this is what's been done, and then my lab kind of really went into how do we do this on a large scale, and how do we conduct a cluster RCT to really show that it has an impact on diet intake, but beyond that, some different metabolic health parameters. So my lab is called Eden Lab, and at the beginning I showed a website, and at the end I'll have a website with a QR code that you can link to it. But it stands for Educate, Evaluate, Nutrition. I'm going to start by telling you all about our Texas Sprouts project, and then I'll get into telling you about some of our other projects that we're working on. Texas Sprouts was an NIH-funded grant that began in 2015 and ended in 2020. So we were really fortunate to get all of our data collection done right before COVID hit. But it was to test the effects of a 1 year in-school gardening, nutrition, and cooking program on improving diet and reducing obesity measures in high-risk third through fifth graders and their families. It was funded by NIH, but we had lots of other partners, including UT Health, which is our School of Public Health. We had Texas A&M. Yes, UT and Texas A&M do collaborate together. If you're from Texas, that's a huge rivalry, but we work together quite often. And a lot of other nonprofits came to the board and supported it, mainly Sprouts Healthy Communities Foundation, which I'm going to talk about our partnership over the years, and Whole Kids Foundation. So a little bit about Texas Sprouts. This was a cluster RCT with 16 schools. 8 schools were randomized to the Texas Sprouts intervention, and 8 schools randomized to the control. An edible garden was built at each school. So unlike, we could have started with schools that had gardens, and there are quite a lot. But we wanted to make sure everybody kind of had an equal planning, starting point. So we made sure that schools that were enrolled in our project had a want and desire to start a school garden, but didn't have a school garden on site. And so we built these gardens, and you can see here's a picture of one of ours. They were anywhere between a third and a half an acre. Texas, we do have the benefit of space, and so we a lot of times put down decomposed granite, and we built mini teaching beds so that multiple grades could have beds. Many times we did like towers that they could go underneath with different types of produce. Kids oftentimes decorated. We used cinder blocks so they could really make it their own. And every garden also had an outdoor teaching space. So we had benches and a whiteboard. Some gardens, as I'm going to show you later, also we built shade structures, which became important because it's so hot in Texas. Throughout the school year, we led 18 in-school garden nutrition lessons. They were taught to all third through fifth grade students. So even those that weren't in the study, they got it as part of their everyday lesson plan. And then we had 9 parent and family classes that were taught monthly, and they reflected similar themes that were taught to the student lessons. I just want to point out, I'm going to go back to this. We provided the educators for this study, and there's pros and cons to that, and I'll show you both later in the talk. But the first thing I wanted to do is if you did it the way you designed it, if you taught the classes the way you designed it, could you have an impact on health? So it was really an effectiveness trial. We did multiple measures in person. My team would go up there and we would do anthropometrics on the kids, height, weight, BMI, blood pressures, waist circumference. We would do Tanita body fat percentages. We would have the kids fill out a questionnaire packet that asked things about dietary intake and related dietary behaviors, things like home access to vegetables and food and nutrition security. We also collected a subsample. We did 24-hour recalls on, so we had close to 1,000 kids that we called, whereas the entire kids got a more like a screener on dietary intake. We also did a subsample of blood draws as diabetes screens, fasting blood draws in the schools before and after. And then we sent home parent a packet for parents to fill out, and it included things like diet, home environment, and diet-related behaviors. I'm going to show you a little video about our program. So this is like less than a minute.
Texas Sprouts will follow 2,400 third through fifth graders at 16 Austin area schools over the course of 2 years. Its purpose is simple. Examine the effects a gardening, nutrition, and cooking program has on student health, both in and outside the classroom.
We do talk about all the nutritional aspects and benefits of the fruit and vegetables, but we really just try to get them to like to eat it.
Texas Sprouts, educating children from seed to plate about nutrition and its potential life-changing benefits.
We hope that the data that we get from this study actually shows that the garden-based program does have big reductions in obesity, improvements in diet, but we're also looking at other things in this grant like academic performance and time on task. So that's like how behavior changes in the classroom. Every single lesson has either a cooking component or a taste test. So they will be trying something at every lesson. And we don't cook it for them. We have the kids actually cook it. We set up tables and they're preparing, they're cutting.
I think it's particularly important that students are able to just see their food grow, that they're able to come out in the backyard of their school and watch food that they planted grow into something that they can eat. I mean, I think there's a lot of misinformation about diets and what you should eat and what you shouldn't eat out there. And especially small kids are super malleable and they aren't really sure what to decide. And this is just an awesome opportunity for us to say, hey, there's nothing truer than picking something out of the ground and eating it and it tasting good.
Cilantro. Can y'all say that? Cilantro?
Cilantro.
Cilantro. Oh, muy bien, tu pronunciación.
Kids these days don't know where their food comes from. You hold up different vegetables and you have no idea what they are. And so teaching kids where our food comes from and the food system that it's involved and getting food from the farm to the grocery store is really key.
Right. Oops. Okay, so we actually got more than 2,500 is what we planned to get. Our eligible students were closer to 4,200, and 78% consented to be in the study. So in the clinical study, we had 3,303 students. 95% of them completed the baseline clinical survey measures that we did in the schools. 92% completed the baseline survey. So just so you know, we did not budget for that. Everybody always asks me, how did you get such great participation? And we actually paid the parents. We gave them gift cards to a grocery store, which was hugely successful. And we were way over budget because we did not anticipate that many parents to fill them out, which was a great problem to have. And then 35% of the children completed baseline optional blood draws, which was a little over 1,000. And then we had close to a quarter that completed optional diet recalls at pre. And a little bit descriptives on our sample. 47% were female, 65% were Hispanic, and that was by design. We enrolled students that served 50% free and reduced lunch and served 50% Hispanic populations, which reflects a general population that we see in Central Texas. The average age was 9, and 26% were pre-diabetic. We were actually shocked at this number because, the average age of our kids is 9. And this is done by a fasting glucose sample or an HbA1c, which measures long-term blood glucose. So we were kind of shocked to see that almost, a little over a quarter were pre-diabetic. 69% received free and reduced lunch, and close to 70% reported food insecurity at baseline. Post-study, we actually got great measures. Again, 91% of our kids filled out the clinical survey and the anthropometric measures. 45% completed the post-surveys on the parents. 62%. So we basically had complete blood draws on around 700 kids before and after the intervention. And 64%, around 500 kids, completed the pre and post diet recalls. Just a little bit of program fidelity, and I'm going to touch on this in a second. We really wanted to make sure the lessons were delivered as planned. So we had really good delivery. 100% of the classes were delivered. Most of the activities were done. A couple classes we had to cut short. 66% were taught outside. We did give teachers the option with weather that they could teach it inside. That was actually higher than we thought. That was a really hot couple years for us. So we did have some heat issues, which is why we added shade structures later on to the gardens after we finished the study. And then the parents was dismal attendance. We delivered close to 90% of the classes were taught. We had less than 7% consent of the consented parents come to one class, and less than 1% attended more than one class. So, and a lot of this was before COVID, so we did not do virtual lessons, which lesson learned, and moving forward, we would absolutely plan on doing some virtual lessons for the parents. We know that about 80% of this population are bused in, so we know that getting to and from schools is challenging. So I think one way to really do this is to go to, do the virtual lessons in the homes. Okay, so we have about a dozen papers published on these findings that you can read. This is the main outcomes paper. We did see a significant improvements in vegetable intake, which was our main outcome. We saw a little over almost a half a serving increase compared to no change in the control. We also looked at the healthy eating index using the 24-hour recalls, and we saw no overall intervention effect on the overall quality, the index, but we did see several of the component scores go up. So once again, we saw increases in vegetables, increases in total dairy, decreases in fatty acids, and decreases in refined grains. So while the program focused on fruits and vegetables, there was this idea that was taught throughout about whole foods. So I think back then it wasn't such a buzzword, but really the intervention was a whole foods intervention focused on fruits and vegetables, whole grains, and decreasing refined grains and sugar sweetened beverages. We did see changes in metabolic outcomes. So this is using, the close to 1,000 kids that we had close to 700 kids that had pre and post blood draws. We did see HbA1c went significantly down in the intervention group and up in the control group. And again, this was a cluster analysis by school. We also saw a significant reduction in LDL cholesterol in the intervention group, where it did also go down in the control, but not significantly. Because the schools that we worked with, they were really interested in academic performance. I know many of you guys on this call work with schools, and really that is a big push. We actually had two schools that had to drop out of our program after like going way far in. We'd actually built the gardens because of academic performance. They were afraid they weren't going to test as stars, so they kind of dropped out because they thought this program would take away from academic performance. So we really wanted to show that actually, if you do it, this is a way to improve on academic performance. So in Texas, we have a standardized test called the STAR test. I'm sure every state has some sort of equivalent test name for it, but we saw improvements in the intervention and the total STAR scores more so than in the control schools. You can see here their control schools started at a lower range, and this is despite trying to match them with a race and ethnicity and socioeconomic status. It's just how the data fell. Specifically, we saw that fourth grade reading scores went up. And we didn't see science and math improvements, but we did hear qualitatively afterwards, a lot of the teachers used the garden as a space to journal. They did a lot of journaling and self-reflective writing in the garden, even when they weren't doing their nutrition lesson. Because this is a little complicated slide, but one of the things we always hear when we do these school-based projects is, that's great, but how do you scale that? And when we think about scaling a nutrition intervention, cooking and gardening are the two things that cost the most, take the most amount of time. So many times those are the things that get dropped. And I wanted to show, okay, there's actually the cooking and the gardening self-efficacy, the things that we did were one of the strongest mediators of increased intake at the end. And so we're one of the first studies to show that, in fact, we think it's the hands-on gardening and cooking components that were the reason we saw behavior change and downstream metabolic improvements. As I just mentioned, there's a big push to Nova kind of ultra processed foods, and where really shooting to get kids to eat more unprocessed, minimally processed foods like fruits and vegetables, and stay away from the ultra processed foods. And so this analysis was done by my previous grad student, and in fact, we did see a significant reduction in improvement in the unprocessed foods in the intervention, and a reduction in the ultra processed foods. And so this was one of the first kind of large RCT studies to show that in a school base that we could reduce ultra processed food intake. And because we were teaching at the school, and because, as I mentioned, the parents didn't go to a lot of the classes, we were like, well, are we just changing diet behaviors at the school? What's happening at home? And this actually study was looking at by another one of my grad students, and it found that there was an increase in home food availability of healthy food. So fruits and vegetables, whole grains, we saw an increase in the intervention and a decrease in the control. So kind of key takeaways, and again, all these papers are in press right now that you can follow, but is that school gardening programs compared to the control had increases in vegetable intake, improvements in diet quality, reductions in ultra-processed food, and increases in minimally processed food, improvements in glucose control, reductions in lipids, improvements in academic performance, and we saw a number of behaviors like cooking and gardening self-efficacy and attitudes that mediated the improvements in vegetable intake. We also saw an improvements in nutrition security, or access and availability of healthy foods at the home. So we're really excited, and we published a lot of these findings, as I mentioned. But, after we got done, it was like, okay, now what? And when we even started to look for schools, like if you remember, I said our inclusion criteria for these schools is they couldn't have a garden. So even just finding that data, like what schools have gardens, we couldn't find it anywhere. And so we kind of realized that, man, we really need to do, like, we need to understand the landscape of school gardens in Central Texas. So simultaneously, while we were doing this, we kind of developed a school garden sustainability survey. Like, what are the barriers and the predictors to your school garden? Do you have a thriving school garden? Because again, we needed to know, do schools even have a garden before we can even start our NIH study? So this is another project that I've worked on for the past 5 years in combination with some of my other grad students. This is something that Jennifer's doing now. We have a current school garden sustainability survey, and we published on this before, which I'll allude to, but she actually is coming out with a new study soon. It actually is hopefully close to, we're on the third revision at JNEB right now, so hopefully this will come out soon. But this was a 65 item questionnaire that we developed asking some basic demographic items to the school. And we sent this survey to administrators, teachers, school staff, sometimes garden coordinators or leads that were, instructional support teachers also filled this out. So this analytic sample includes 406 teachers from around 250 schools, primarily elementary, large portion of them Title I, or over 50% eligible for free and reduced lunches, and 81% were public. And because we were asking the schools to self-identify their garden as having a thriving status, we used the following 4 domains, which were well or decently maintained physical garden, excellent or good school integration, excellent or good community involvement, and excellent or good resources to define what we call as a thriving garden. Because we wanted to see, okay, have these teachers fill out these surveys. How do we know what's effective as a school garden or not? And so doing this, we actually had several schools self-report their garden as being thriving because they had to have 3 out of these 4 excellent or good identified factors. And what we found are the key predictors for having a thriving garden was having a garden leadership team or coordinator. And this is not surprising because if you're starting a garden, many times if you have one teacher or one parent that are doing it, when that parent, his kids graduates or that teacher moves on or takes another job, the garden goes to weeds again. And so we really know that having an appointed garden leadership team that's made up of 2 or 3 people that typically needs to have a teacher, but can also be made up of parents is really important. Teaching multiple courses and grades in the gardens. So another thing we've heard over the years is that, oh, it's Miss Smith's garden. There was one teacher that would have a garden and it would kind of be her little baby and she would take her kindergartners out there, but that's the only person that used it. We do know that having multiple courses and grades taught in the garden is important. Having several garden work days per year. And we actually kind of got it down quantitatively to having 4, a minimum of 4, maximum of 6 seems to be the best. And that also makes sense. Having 1 or 2 before the school year starts, one maybe in the fall to do fall planting, and 1 in the spring to do spring planting are important. And again, having work days and having the garden upkeep is another way that the teachers typically will use the garden. If the garden's full of weeds and not maintained, it's harder to encourage your teachers that are not regular users to go out there and take their classes there. Teaching in the garden weekly or twice a month was important, an important predictor of having a thriving garden. Having 25 plus garden volunteers, and those garden volunteers can be anything from church members to boys and girls clubs to Boy Scouts groups. We've had a variety of things. We actually have several restaurants that adopt our school gardens around here. So getting the restaurant people to go out there and work in the garden is a way to, and culinary students, which is great. Teachers attending 4 or more trainings per year around school gardening. So this is going to lead you into my program that we do offer, but that seems to be important. Having a partner organization, so this could be a local nonprofit that you're working with. Having annual garden budget. So this is in the school budget. Administrators having having some sort of garden budget to do things around. And the number 1 predictor is having strong administration support. So the principal or the assistant principal supporting this. And we're right now, she's working on this publication right now, and she's got a lot of qualitative data to suggest, like, what does that look like? And we're finding that administrators that leave time in a faculty meeting for garden related information is important. And if administrators appoint 2 or 3 people to be on the garden leadership committee. If the administrator supports the trainings that they can do, either pays for them or allows for them to have a sub or professional development. Those are all kind of steps that administrators can do to support their garden. So moving a little bit more, working with Sprouts. When we did this, Sprouts Healthy Communities Foundation is the nonprofit associated with the Sprouts grocery store. I'm not sure if you guys have them there, but it's and Whole Kids Foundation also gave us money, Greener Planet, and Big Green, and we work with the School Garden Support Organization Network, which is a really robust website that if you want any access to garden, school-based garden resources, that's where you can go. But anyway, Sprouts actually funded my project called the Sprouting Teachers Project. For the past 7 years, they've given my lab money. And they've given us quite a lot of money, over $2.5 million. And so I know that there's lots of researchers on this call. And I want to point out that, we had an evidence-based project. We had a, very robust cluster RCTs, school-based study that was effective at producing improvements and health outcomes in academics. And when I got done, sure, I could have written, we read a lot of papers and I'm writing more grants. But what I was frustrated at is now what? I've got an evidence-based project and now I'm just supposed to like leave that and move on and write another scientific paper that maybe 3 people are going to read. And I just kind of got a little frustrated with that academic cycle. And so simultaneously, I reached out and got funding from a nonprofit that was like, "Hey, we want to support your research." And it started out small. They're like, "What do you do? What do you need help with?" And the biggest thing I needed help with is I just did this, school this RCT with 16 schools, and now what? They don't have a way to continue their gardens. There weren't any training opportunities for them. They would have to pay a lot of money to get professional development in this area. So we took it on to kind of develop some trainings for teachers. And so they gave me a little bit of money. And to date, we've worked with over 500 school teachers from 100 schools across 6 states. We have a pretty robust application process. It is open. Sorry, this date's wrong. It should be this year. We are taking some. We're actually decreasing the number we're taking this year, and I'll tell you about that in a second. But we've developed our Canvas module, like an online Canvas module that our teachers enroll in. There's 2 types of trainings that they can apply for: the garden leaders, and individual and small group teachers. So this could be if you have a garden coordinator that you want, or a garden leadership team that you want 2 or 3 of the teachers to go to. This training is very different because it helps establish the school garden for the entire school. It talks about things like work days and communication. How do you get administration support? How do you get funding? It's very specific to setting up and maintaining the physical garden so that the entire school can use it, which is key, I think, to sustaining a school garden. And then we have individual and small group teachers, so that it could be that 2 third-grade teachers apply. And they learn how to integrate the garden into their school lessons. So these trainings are not designed to say, "Here's our curriculum, this is what you have to use." It's really to meet teachers where they're at. We know that teachers across, different cities and states all have, many of them are independent school districts and all use different curriculum. So it's like, how can you take a life cycle of the plant, whatever curriculum you're using, and how can you teach that in the garden setting? So it's a series of 6 trainings throughout the year, and we have those 2 tracks. We also do Spread the Harvest 2 times a year, where we hand out supplies, compost, seeds, and seedlings. I think last year we're hitting over 200 schools that participate in this event. And we are piloting giving each garden leader 2,000 stipends. So they're getting actually stipends to serve as garden leads. And actually that number is outdated as well. We'll have about 30 teachers that got the stipends versus 30 teachers that didn't. Both programs receiving our programs. And we're trying to see if there are additional benefits of providing incentives, cash incentives, and stipends to teachers to be garden leads. So stay tuned for those findings. My grad student is hopefully presenting that data this summer. Because we partner with Sprouts, they are, like I mentioned, a national grocery store chain. They were very interested in how can we get kids cooking in the classrooms. And so we integrated Sprouts built out classroom cooking lessons to their site, their national website, so our teachers can go online. We provide them with $50 gift cards, and they can go online and pick from a number of recipes and then have that Instacarted directly to their school. Let's say that they go on, they're like, I have 50 students because I teach I teach all the third graders science. They can go on and select and then use the gift cards that we gave them to purchase their groceries, and it's delivered directly to the school. So kind of taking out a little bit of the challenge with getting groceries together at the school level. It would show up in a kit. At the beginning of the year, we'd also provide these pre-kits for teachers that wanted to do the cooking component that included things like safe knives, plastic knives, cutting boards, mixing bowls. And so they got this kind of box at the beginning of the year, and then they would use their gift cards from Sprouts to order the ingredients directly to the school. We've done this with 40 teachers from 8 schools so far, and on average, they do 3 to 4 cook kits per year. And around 82% of the teachers reported that cooking activity and recipes were easy to incorporate into their lesson plans, and really 80% reported this activity with their students. So we are actually wrapping this up with much larger numbers now, and we'll have those findings to show soon. So simultaneously, because we're at UT Austin and doing all these projects, we have around a little over 300 nutrition majors in our degree. And when I did Texas Sprouts, over the course of 3 years, 4 years of the program, I had over 350 undergrads that dedicated over 100 hours each to our project. And when we got done, we realized, oh my gosh, these students really want and desire to learn this, have this experiential learning where they're going out into the gardens and teaching kids how to cook and garden. And so in combination with another faculty member, Michelle Hockett Cooper, we developed a 2-semester course for undergrads. And so to date, we've had over 150 undergrads that completed this course. They work in student pairs, and we place them with preceptors. So we place them with school teachers across Austin, and our students go out into the school settings and teach 9 to 10 gardening, cooking, and nutrition classes throughout the school year. And then the teachers serve as preceptors and kind of grade them. It's almost like student teaching. Think of it like that. And we actually model it after our student teaching, our College of Education here, our education majors. It's become one of our most popular elective courses. The students absolutely love it. And many times, a lot of our students are pre-med and go on, and I still get letters today and emails from them saying that this was their single most impactful course they took while at UT. So this is a great way to kind of, educate the next of scientists, but also to give back to the community. So this is a skill set that the kids also benefit from. So, many of you guys, especially at Brown University, you may have ways to do this where you are not only educating the students, but educating the community as well in certain things like nutrition. And so hopefully that kind of gives you an overview of how gardening is impactful and can reach all different age ranges, but also health, mental health, and academic performance. And so I mentioned this at the beginning, is that I think it's important as researchers, and I know many of y'all are on here, is we need to do more with our research. As you find things new in it's important to publish your results. And many of us have to write next grants for promotion and to fund our grad students and, to stay employed. But I think it's really important to kind of break that academic cycle and to figure out how we can take our evidence and disseminate it back out to the community. And so to do this type of research, it takes a massive army of people. I just want to thank my lab, my previous grad students, who many of them still work on this paper, my previous colleagues, and our funding sources. And so I try to give it a lot of time for feedback, but you can go to my site right there. That'll take you to my site. Right now we have applications open for teachers. And as I mentioned, everything is virtual now. So we can do our programming to teachers outside of the state. If you have an interest or know a teacher that wants to do that. We also provide lots of free material. We curated different types of a curriculum for teachers, but we also have all of our PDFs for all of our different research projects on there. And I did mention that we're going to be having a decrease in the amount of schools we take, and that's mainly because Sprouts gave over $10 million last year to support school gardening, and they are partnering with us now and going to require like a quarter of their schools that receive their funding to actually do our programming because it's been so successful. And so we are going to have to offer more of the programming to the grant recipients. But we're right now looking at a way to monetize or to offer this type of program to schools very at reduced costs so schools can still learn how to use their school gardens and take their kids out and teach nutrition and garden education out in their school gardens.